Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the Global Power Propulsion Society Forum. It's going to be I'm very excited and happy to open up the day with a panel on digitalization. Yesterday, I counted the number of times digitalization was mentioned, and I came to 52. And maybe some of you came to higher numbers or lower numbers, but we all know it's all in our head, not just as a hype, as a slogan, but it's also impacting our daily life. It's impacting the life of our children and also of our elderly, of all the generations, and it's impacting business life. And in today's panel, we want to take a look from different perspectives. And I'm really happy that there is such a rich experience from very, very different perspectives in this panel. As yesterday, we want to start with a keynote of half an hour, and then we have each of the panelists give brief impulses of about 10 minutes with statements that provocate thought, that also provocate questions, and that give you some flashlights on this rich topic that we cannot boil the ocean today, and it's not the purpose. But it's the purpose to get some deeper things, and I really encourage you to take notes during the presentations and questions, because after we've heard the keynote and the presentations from the panelists, we are looking forward to go into a discussion. And I'm well aware it's early morning, and I hope that we'll be able to spirit up so that we have a lively interaction. So let's start with the keynote. The keynote will be provided by Perry Stoneman. He's Executive Vice President and Utilities Global Sector Leader of Capgemini. Perry is located in Canada, Toronto, and he started his career with Metropolitan Life in Canada and worked for 10 years as CEO and founder of Certus Concepts Online Incorporation. And in 2001, joined Capgemini through different functions, while he was then, between 2006 and 2008, he held the position of Capgemini's business development practice for North America, energy, utilities, and chemical sector. And he worked on strategy, sales, marketing, alliances in the United States and Canada. And in 2009, he took a global role in leading the smart energy services, where he took a global impact on smart metering. And in 2012, he was appointed Utilities Global Sector Leader. Perry, it's going to be a pleasure. Please.
Thank you, Frank. Is my mic on?
If the audio guys can adjust it. Here, let's.
Good morning. So before I get started, something to admit, I'm a consultant. Who are consultants in the room? Okay, data scientists, professors, academics, industry leaders? Okay, I counted 3 consultants. You know what us consultants do? We ask you the question, what you think, you tell us, and we sell that back to you. Okay, so. Just waiting for the presentation. And we have it.
There you go. It's all yours.
So good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to join you here today at GPPS. It's my first time here. I was able to attend many of the sessions yesterday, and I found it extremely interesting and energizing to hear so many people in academia and industry talk about where things are going and not knowing the future, but knowing that there is a change and a different future coming. Before I get into the presentation, I did want to start with just a brief background on Capgemini, very brief. Capgemini is a global consulting and system integration company. We have close to 200,000 employees worldwide, about 12.5 billion euros in revenue in 2016. And we do consulting, we do system integration, we do outsourcing, but we also happen to have a unique division within our group that's related to leading digital. It's our global innovation. It resides within our consulting organization, and their job and charter since 2012 has been to understand the world of digitization across all industries and where it's going. So with that, I thought, what better way to talk to this crowd about a study we did with our consulting organization and in collaboration with MIT. George Westerman, Didier Bonnier, and Andrew McAfee collaborated to do a study to understand what all these digital technologies were really doing in the corporate world. And so the first study was 2012, the second study was 2014, and we've refreshed it annually ever since. So, consultants do something else. We create quadrants. So everything in every study a consultant will do, whether it's Gartner, IDC, you're going to see we create a quadrant. Now, for those that aren't familiar with quadrants, I think you all are. Bottom left, bad. Top right, good. Never know what the top left is. Never know what the bottom left is. So we've defined this study to define digital maturity into those quadrants. The beginners are on the bottom. What's a beginner? Basically, the characteristics are they're not doing much. And generally, management is skeptical. They're not too certain that these digital technologies, whether it's cloud, mobility, analytics, are going to matter. Top right, digitally mature, they do believe. And they've changed their organization and they're using technologies to drive change. Top left, fashionistas, let's try everything, see what sticks. They have no detailed plan, and they're not using it to transform their business model or their company culture. And then conservatives on the bottom right, they have a strong desire to use technologies, but they take maybe one at a time. So what's this matter when we looked at the first 391 companies within the study? We were startled to find that the axes were plotted right in the middle by the consultants. So consultants have a chance to put the crosshairs where they like. They put it in the middle, and they divided up the businesses into the 4 equal quadrants. But what does it mean to be digerati versus beginner? There's the answer. Cost effectiveness. Digerati are 26% more cost effective in running their business. Whether that's the factory, whether that's the generation, whether that's the retail, whether it's your data centers, it's good to be digerati. By startling comparison, conservatives 24% worse. That's a 50% swing. What's kind of funny and surprising, we didn't expect it, actually we weren't expecting these big numbers, is that the fashionistas are worse off than the conservatives. So it's better to take one technology and drive it through your organization than it is to take them all and see what sticks. All right? And then on the performance market valuation, the market does not like fashionistas the most. They don't seem to have a vision or a purpose. Whereas digerati and conservatives, again, are a decent quadrant to be in. So what's that mean for the utility industry, oil and gas? That's where the industry's plotted in 2012 and 2014. Since then, there's been some movement, particularly in utilities, and discrete manufacturing have moved significantly up in the quadrant, but that's where utilities started when we started the study. So they're conservative. They're not bad. Obviously, high-tech companies, retail and banking, you would expect them to be fairly digitally savvy. Okay, they have to compete. The tech companies compete on technology, so they have to be at forefront to technology. But for those that are in propulsion here, I put you in the top quadrant. Propulsion, you'd be high-tech. Okay, oil and gas, we didn't have enough sample study. You have to have 20 surveys to be able to plot this, according to the consultants. But it would be in the bottom quadrant, conservative as well, I do believe. So you're a utility. Why do you care? Why does being conservative not okay? Why do they have to move to digitization? We hear from them, I'm regulated. I'm protected. My peers aren't changing. Why do I need to change? It's too risky to apply all the technologies. My teams, my management, my culture for 100 years have been reluctant to change. Why do you think I can get them to adopt change now? And so, and many of them say, we have time. We have 10 years. Many are saying we think. Now I'm starting to hear recently that they don't believe they have 10 years anymore. But let me tell you why. That's a comparison against their peer group. From the World Energy Market Observatory, and I brought Frank a book today. It's a publication we just released on November 19th, 2017. It's a 300-page book that studies the world of energy and utility industry around the globe. It covers things like climate change. It covers things like security of supply. It covers things like the energy transformation and change. I just took a couple pieces out of this. I actually reduced the number of pieces because so many were presented yesterday. But renewables are undeniable. We do believe they're unstoppable to a point. At some point, renewables stop and you have to have your base loads. But we do think renewables are unstoppable, and the reason is price and innovation around the price of and industrialization of renewables. The 85% from 2009 to 2016 in PV pricing is phenomenal. And we're still expecting by 2025 another 59% reduction in the price of PV. That's not even taking account into some efficiencies that might come from the new foil technologies. Wind. We are seeing wind significantly drop too. I don't have the statistic up, but wind in the last 7 years dropped 68%, largely driven by efficiencies, better knowledge of where to put them, better blade technology. But wind has dropped significantly as well, and we're expecting onshore wind to drop by 26% further by 2025 and 35% by 2025. Batteries, talked about yesterday. I'd consider batteries 5 years behind solar. So it hasn't hit all of its technology advancements and industrialization curve yet. So what we're expecting is the battery price to fall lower. By 2020, we're thinking it's going to be around 190 kilowatt hours to install, and then by 2030, Elon Musk is claiming between 2025 and 2030 that the cost will fall to $100 per kilowatt hour. That's going to make it a lot more affordable to be used to help solve the intermittency of the renewable energies. So what's that mean? For those that don't know, levelized cost of electricity is just a way to measure between different energy sources. I'm showing the graph of Europe. The World Energy Market Observatory has the US and Asia Pac levelized cost of electricity as well. But if you look at it, you have hydro dam is still the cheapest form of electricity in Europe. Next over, natural gas semi-base, not bad, sitting around 75 euros on average. Next you have your onshore wind, pretty good, 50 euros to just over 100 euros, depending on where it's located and how old those turbines are. Hydro One River, pretty effective, but not that many places you can install it. Coal semi-base, higher than natural gas, you'd expect it. Offshore wind is still fairly high cost here, around 100 euros. And utility scale PV, not bad at about 60. Now, we're expecting all of these to come down and the ranges to grow because the old install base will remain high. Not going to replace those assets, but as the new ones come online, the bar pulls down. Also, location is pretty important. It's a stark contrast if you look at the United States. The solar utility scale cost is 49 to 61 megawatts an hour. So in the US, given their solar radiation, abundance of it, and a fair amount of land and deserts that don't have heavy cloud cover, their cost is much lower to operate these units. Same with onshore wind. Interesting, it's don't have the graph, but onshore wind in the United States of America now is the cheapest form of electricity you can implement, period, bar none. Okay, and they do have a lot of land, and they do have a lot of people that are willing to have those towers put up in those areas. So why does that matter about digitization if you are a utility? So, because you shouldn't compare yourself with your peers. Your peers aren't your problem if you're a utility. Your peers are the renewable tech companies that are coming in. And so who are these companies? Google, Amazon, IKEA, Walmart, Procter & Gamble. These companies have very deep pockets, large roof spaces, have a lot of influence over policymakers, and they're implementing their own renewable energy farms, wind farms, and solar farms. They are coming off of the grid. In fact, Google recently, in the state of Nevada, was last year in September, I believe, applied for the right to not have to go to Nevada Power for their electricity for a data center. Okay. The casinos asked to do the same thing 3 years ago. They were rejected. The regulators said, if you want to leave Nevada Power, pay them the stranded cost of the grid. One casino, Wynn, did. He said, the heck with this, I'm going to do what I want to do. Again, deep enough pockets, went and did what he wanted. We don't know how Google will play out, but Nevada won't get a data center in Google if they don't get what they want. That's the type of influence these RenTechs can influence onto the industry, and why Nevada Power have to start looking at this different, and I'm using them as a proxy for many utilities, why they all have to start looking at this differently and start thinking about renewable technology and digitization as something that's critical. But large industrials aren't the only ones. Here's another example. This is a small community-based startup in the United Kingdom called Mongoose. What Mongoose does, what the community does, was hired a couple of smart consultants or industry people that understand renewable energy and distributed energy resources, and they started to build a consultancy that allows the community or members of the community start to do site planning, technology choice and selection, financing, electricity planning. They do the energy management of these renewable assets, or DERs, and they're part of the community. Now, this type of model, well, it's small right now, has the possibility of spreading pretty significantly. So communities are getting into the game. And last, this is a Uber-like peer-to-peer community established in Germany. How many of you know about Sonnen community in the German market? I know we have some colleagues. So people, households that have put solar panels on their roof and happen to have a Sonnen battery can subscribe with Sonnen or Sonnen community. I think it's €5 a month or something, or maybe, doesn't matter, it's not very much. And it allows them to participate in a trading system to trade their power. So on the diagram here it says Peter in Munich and Paul in Flensburg have sun, and Martha in Frankfurt and Magda in Hamburg do not. So Peter and Paul, if they know they have excess battery capacity and power, can share it with Martha and Magda. And there's commercial exchange of funds for that. It was interesting at the European Utility Week this year, E.ON, who's had its challenges because of the high penetration of renewable, is actually fighting back. And they came up with a very interesting solution, and it's called Solar Cloud. What Solar Cloud is, when you go see E.ON, is they say if you have the rooftop here, so it's a response to Sonnen, but if you're Peter in Munich and you also have an electric vehicle and you drive somewhere else in the city and you're not using the power on your roof, you can plug into an E.ON pedestal and they'll let you charge the car for free using the power you're generating on the house. It's just a tariff game, but it's smart. It's a loyalty play. It keeps the customers. So, given all of these factors, utilities are in an interesting paradigm. We're living in a we're living in a customer-driven world. Renewable energy prices are declining. New battery technologies are getting better. New players with deep pockets, I didn't mention oil and gas, and many others are entering the energy business and buying renewable energy. And you have operational costs that are extremely hard to shed if you're a utility. So, and difficult financially times, particularly here in Europe. So what's the answer? What do? You digitally transform. And what are the proof points for that? We've defined digital transformation into 3 domains or 3 towers. The first is around the customer experience, or more generally, the retail side of the business. Inside of that dimension, you have to look for a better understanding of your customers. Most utilities don't know their customers very well. They have 1 or 2 touch points a year. They send a bill once a month or even less. And the amount of dialogue they have relative to an Amazon is pretty much 0. So they have to get to know their customers. They have to look for top-line growth, adding new customers. How do you attract new customers? kind of means you probably need social networking and some basic understanding of how customers refer each other to each other and how likes work. Utilities don't understand how likes work. Customer touchpoints. Interesting, Eneco in Netherlands found out when they put a home device and thermostat into the consumer's home, they had an interaction with that consumer once a day. That allowed them to push information or understand what the consumer is looking for better, and their net promoter score went up 30 points as a result of that single change, more interaction. Next dimension is operational processes. That goes down to the digitization of processes. It also looks at worker enablement and performance management. Of course, I'm simplifying the topics, but we did see there's a fair amount of activity starting to happen in that, around asset particularly. The one area where utilities are actually leading on digitization is around the understanding of assets, the analytics of assets. Smart meters and smart grids have been around a while, and they're starting to get more granular into other assets. And then finally, business models. Utilities have to understand new business models. The new people entering the business come in with a different business model. They're not a traditional bricks and mortar, lines and wires and towers and poles operation. They look at the business differently, and they look at the business through DERs and other solutions. But just some facts and numbers associated with those. I'm going to take you through a couple case studies that prove these. But there's up to 50% savings for a digital retailer. 27% savings for taking a brownfield, non-digital plant to digital. Most of the savings is in fuel cost savings, okay? Being more efficient around it, but there's still savings around the asset management, asset optimization, and reduction in worker activity. And then finally, sell to the Rentex. When Google went to Netherlands, put a data center in, Eneco was first to call on them. Google didn't start looking for sites and locations. Eneco sold them 100% of their Princess Amelia wind farm. Google got a long-term contract, and Eneco got a long-term contract. Google got what they wanted, renewable energy, and it was a good business win-win for both. So the Rentex don't have to be a threat. They can be a new channel, new opportunity to sell to. So energy retailer, 3 slides to talk about an agile energy retailer. These are the attributes, I'm not going to walk through them all, that we feel have to be part of a retailer, an agile energy retailer. These are all the digital levers you can drive. There's a ton. A digital retailer should have a call center that's efficient, optimized, and their workers should be knowledge workers, not somebody just taking a call, and they should never have to flip a call to anybody else. You should be looking at digital channels. Many of society today don't want to be on an analog channel. They want to be in a digital channel. Give them the digital channel. It's cheaper, much cheaper to operate. Look at different pricing. One of the biggest things that's happening in retailers today is I like to call it transparency and trust. Do you trust and do you think your utility retailer is transparent? Can I see a show of hands of anybody that does? Okay, it's a challenge that they have. I'd like to talk later and know who your utility is. But it is a challenge for them. They haven't built transparency and trust. A company in New Zealand, Flextricity, came out with wholesale prices. We'll just sell you electricity at wholesale prices plus 7%. We make our 7%. You know you're getting a fair price on electricity based on wholesale markets. If the wholesale market's really high, stop using electricity or pay a lot. And they signed up a ton of people. Our CEO in the region was in a taxi. He said, "Have you heard of this Flextricity?" The taxi driver said, "Yes." I signed up with them. He said, "Aren't you worried about when the wholesale price gets high?" He said, "No, I've learned that we're hydroelectric dependent. There's a lot of water in the reservoirs. We're not going to have high wholesale prices for a year. If we have drought, I'll switch back." A taxi driver understands the energy equation in New Zealand and made choices and purchase decisions based on transparency and trust. So robotic process automation is huge. On one client, Brownfield, we believe we can take 40% of their call center agents out, outsourced call center agents out. Robotics always scares people. You're going to lose jobs. I think the jobs just go somewhere else most of the time. But 40% of those jobs are not needed. Now, they were highly inefficient. I won't talk about who they are. But 40% of the jobs we believe can go. we're on track to taking out the first 20 within the first year. And the other 20 come as the remaining 60 get better at their job with better tools, better information. So you're skilling up those that remain with better skills. So how does that work in real life? Here's an architecture of a digitally native energy retailer. Now, you can change some of the boxes, and this is not what we implemented. This is built, it's running. The way we designed it was we took a bunch of consultants that did market segmentation of that country and tried to understand the demographics of the market. We took people from a utility, quite a few of them, about 20, and we had 20 of our business processing outsourcing folks. And they said it was going to be 6 weeks, it was 10. And their mandate was to work in a room. We gave them the scenario. You've all been fired from your company, and you're going to go figure out how to create an energy retailer to attack your former employer. Digitally, without a lot of money. And none of the bricks and mortar that you ever had in the past. You're free to do what you want. But make sure the architecture works, make sure the processes are efficient, and make sure that you're going to be a digital attacker. The CEO liked it, said build it. Speed to market is critical to be digitally mature or a digerati. Typical implementations of a new company using classical ERP or packaged or bespoke take a long time, 6 months, up and running. They intend to have 10% of the market, the entire market, at the end of the second year. They are profitable on day one because this operates largely on the cloud. Not day one, day 60. This operates on the cloud, is extremely low cost, and scales. Now, when I presented this to another large US utility, the head of strategy and head of digital said, I want to make this the poster child of where I want to get to. I can't go there overnight because I have bricks and mortar. So his plan is to make sure no business decision is made around technology unless it is moving in the direction of this, not these technologies per se, there's many different competitors in this technology map, but they're moving in this direction. That's retail. Highly powerful, this operates at 50 cents on the dollar compared to the others. What do you do if somebody shows up in your backyard with one of these? Very challenging. I'm going to look at transmission and smart grids quickly, and I won't spend a lot of time on it because smart grids and smart meters have been around a long time. I launched the smart meter program for CAP in 2004. They made it global in 2009. It was a slow ramp up. But we are seeing analytics and data from these sensors. We are seeing that the information that you can glean from the data is huge. I have two examples. One I'll just talk about, the other I'm going to show you. The first is in Australia. About 4 years ago, the Australian Open of tennis that happens in Melbourne was incredibly hot. Those that live in the UK would remember Andrew Murray said he doesn't think they should be playing. It's not safe. I flew down to Melbourne the following week. I met with this utility executive, and he was giddy. And usually when I meet utility executives, they're not giddy and happy and bouncing around the room. And I said, well, why are you so happy? He said, we didn't have a power outage during the heat wave because we would have been seen and talked about in the newspaper. I said, how'd you manage that? He said, well, we used the analytics from the smart meter data to predict every transformer that will fail under a certain weather pattern scenario, and we replaced them all. No outage. So we did make one mistake. We notified people that they're going to have an outage because we're replacing the transformers. He said, that wasn't a mistake. We didn't tell them when. The call center was flooded with calls. So he said, next time we have to connect the planning of the transformer replacement with the call center. But the second example is even simpler. This is a water company in the UK, and it's data from one of their sensors, one of their lines. And they came to us and they said, Capgemini, we lose 24%, 25% of the water we purify and pump to leaks. It's old infrastructure, it's not their fault, it's not new, it's not modern, but they can't keep up with changing and they can't keep up with modernization because it's costly. So they said, do you have a solution? So we went back to them and said, yeah, smart meter it. and do the same thing as Australia. They said, we don't have the time, we can't afford it. So our data scientists said, well, wait a minute, you've been collecting SCADA data on this network for a long time. Did you do anything with it? And they said, yeah, some. So they said, well, why don't we do machine learning and apply it? So this water company took 5 days on average to find a leak after it happened. That's the average. Okay? They gave us the SCADA data. We weren't expecting these results, but what happened is we found a correlation between an event on either pressure or flow and a future-based possible leak. Pressure alert, flow alert, coinciding, leak alert. Oh, too far. 81% of the time when this occurs, a leak occurs. We can tell now 21 days in advance that a leak's going to happen. We can get to 99% precision in a couple of years once we start augmenting the network with additional sensors and using IoT. So at some point, this water company will move from losing 25% of the water it purifies and pumps down to maybe 2, maybe 1. That's a huge game changer and a massive ROI using machine learning and existing SCADA information. This is one last example of operations, and this is a digital plant operation. EDF Nuclear have critical assets. When you walk into a nuclear plant, you need to pick up safety equipment, oxygen tanks, to take with you on your route. These pieces of equipment don't leave the nuclear plant for obvious reasons. And they had a huge problem with the planning and mapping where these assets were left. The workers wouldn't always put them where the other worker thought they were supposed to be. So we went in and put IoT sensors and beacons in the nuclear plant. It's based on an IoT platform we developed with Intel. It's highly secure. It actually comes from the aerospace industry because the core of that IoT platform flies the Airbus. It's the same team in Toulouse, France that wrote the code for the Airbus controls. And we had to have it French certified, cybersecurity certified by the French government to put it in the nuclear plant. But this has changed the game for them. 20% of planning improvement, 30% utilization rate, and they're only censoring critical assets. That plant's now beaconed. They can censor anything. So they can start looking through plant maintenance, et cetera, putting sensors, temperature, vibration, heat, radiation, on other assets or even on the workers as they go in, depending on what the union constraints are. So very straightforward technology can have huge benefits. So coming to my conclusions and being able to hand it over, because I'm supposed to set the stage for 4 other panelists here. What do utilities need to do? You have to digitize. You have to get to digerati because the people coming after you are not your peers. They're new startups, they're disruptive companies, and they're looking at all the technologies. The challenge that utilities have is the challenge that almost every industry has. People are fighting for the data scientists. Utilities regulatory framework sometimes holds them back. The regulators don't recognize some of these investments and do not let them recover. Very challenging. In fact, the regulators probably need more education than utilities now. They have complex internal procedures, particularly in nuclear. It's very, very hard to change some procedures. So that's a barrier to change. And there's some degree of resistance to change, but that's coming down fairly quickly. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. And if you are interested in the World Energy Market Observatory, that is the link. It's free. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much, Perry.